Greetings, everyone. My name's Gabriel. I'm the main presenter for today and tomorrow for FlaskCon 2021, and it should be an interesting couple of days. We've got some workshops lined up today, and we've got also some chats tomorrow as well. So let me just come off of this. Gabriel, otherwise known as Redstone Designer on platforms like Discord, and I'm one of the people behind FlaskCon today, and I'm going to be joined today by Alexander Hultner. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
That's always good. Always good with newfangled systems like these.
Yeah.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am not too bad, thank you. We've got a couple of minutes before the time slot for you. Do you want to just tell us a brief bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Alexander Hultner, and for one part, I'm actually part of organizing this conference. So I'm on the Flask community working group, and professionally, I'm running my own company. I'm a software developer who loves Python and Flask, and been working a lot with the whole web ecosystem. So I have my own consultancy, Hultnér Technologies AB. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about packaging because I'm writing a book on packaging. And during doing that, I've explored some interesting stuff. I want to share some of the things I've learned. So my presentation today is going to be a workshop and a talk. So I'm going to start with just going through a little bit of background history, some stuff about wheels, and once that part is done, we're gonna deconstruct the wheel firstly, and then after that we're gonna construct our own wheel from scratch. So that's going to be interesting. And then if we have enough time, we will also try to host a very simple package repository and pip install it from a Docker server. And I will share some links when we come to that step, so you can pull my GitHub repository to get a starting point. Other than that, everything you need to get started is basically Python and a terminal. Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting, I think, even for me, because I've never actually worked with wheels and packaging Flask applications before. So I'm going to be learning along with the audience, which is going to be one of the most amazing experiences you can get as a sort of presenter at one of these conferences, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say that this talk is not how you would package stuff if you would do it like professionally. This is more like a deep dive into the file format, and we kind of create our own package from scratch just to understand what all the smart tooling we have today does behind the covers.
Okay, I'm excited for this. I'm hoping people watching along with us are going to be excited as well. So if you would like to share your screen, and I can add it to the the stream system. So we've got to make sure this newfangled system works properly.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always some hiccups when you do it digitally.
If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. I think that's Murphy's law. Right, so I'm just going to change this, and we're going to go over to, we're going to add your screen. I think that's done it. That should have done it. Yeah. Okay. Well, off you go. I'm going to mute now, and I will yield to you.
Okay. Okay, so welcome, and thanks for watching my talk. And if you were here before, you heard shortly about it. But basically, it's a talk and a workshop. So at first it was a talk. Then I understood that there were quite a lot of content here, so I kind of reconstructed it as a workshop. So it's gonna start like a talk for the first maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, where I'm gonna go through like the history of packaging and wheels and stuff like that. And then we're going to jump into the more practical session where you can code along if you want, or if you want, you can just watch and do it afterwards yourself. I put all the content on GitHub so you can easily access it. But let's get started then. So yeah, I'm just gonna go to the next slide here. So I'm Alexander Hultnér, as I told you before. I'm founder of Hultnér Technologies AB, and also Papero.io, which is a SaaS service for generating PDFs using standard web tools. I'm writing a book on packaging right now, and that's also how I came up with this talk. I'm on Twitter as @ahultner. You can also contact me via email at contact@hultner.se. And you can see some links at the bottom there. There's hultner.se, which is my website, and slides.com/Hultner is where I try to keep all my conference slides. Not quite all talks end up there, but most. So, and for instance, the slides from this talk is there. So you can see all the blue links here in the slides. These are clickable, so you can go into the slides and click stuff if you want, or if you want to access it afterwards. And you can also reach me on LinkedIn. I'm not gonna go too deep into that. So, and my company then, Hultnér Technologies. It's me, Alexander Hultner. I also have a colleague, Magnus Ljunghard, which you can see on the photo here. We have an office here in central Gothenburg, and we do mainly consulting, also some in-house development. Long term, we want to go more into in-house development, but we will always do a bit of consulting. And we're also looking to hire devs here in Gothenburg. So if there's any Flask fans out there tuning in from Gothenburg who's interested in just hearing what it's like to work here, you can always shoot me an email. So the outline for today then, first, why do we care about this? And then we're going to talk about what the Python package is briefly. We're going to talk a little bit about different distribution types. We're going to talk about eggs. We're going to talk about source distributions. We're going to talk about wheels, and wheels is the main focus of this talk. Then we're going to have the hands-on session. So this is where you can follow along in your own terminal if you want, or you can just watch me if that's what you fancy. But the idea is that during this session, you will be able to follow along if you want, and I will try to keep my eyes on the chat on YouTube. So if you have any questions, I will try to answer them as we go. And basically, the first part is going to be deconstructing a package. So we're going to take a wheel file, the Flask package, themed according to the conference, and we're going to deconstruct that, look into the file format, see how it works, and based on what we learn from that, we're going to go the other way around and try to build our own wheel from scratch using no tooling, or just some simple shell scripts, which is based on what we go through today, and see how easy it actually is to construct a package. And if we have enough time, we will also try to host that package on a very simple local server, and then we're going to spin up a Docker container, pip install it, and see that it actually works. So hopefully that will be interesting. And after that, if we have enough time, I will also show you some modern tooling, what you can do today to make it easier. But the main focus of today's talk is more deep dive into the file format. I'm going to link to some more resources, and then we're going to end with some Q&A if you have some more questions after we're done. So why do we care then? So basically, we want to be able to distribute our code, and this is important so we can reuse our code. We want to be able to share it. sometimes we use open source libraries and want to understand how they work, or maybe create our own open source library. But other times we actually want to create our own packages internally to use wherever we work. And then it's good also to understand how things work, or if there's a problem, then it's actually useful to know. And from my part, it's just interesting to understand the inner workings of things. Another reason that's a good argument to use packaging is that you get a better separation of concerns, because when you split things up in different packages or sub-libraries in your application, then it's much harder to tangle logic together, and it's much easier to have clear separation between the different parts, and that also makes refactoring easier. And if you want to change something, you can actually wait with upgrading the library dependency in some of your projects, while you can do the upgrade directly in others. Yeah, so that's why. And then what is a Python package then? So you probably know this, but for those of you who might not be as familiar, a package is basically a bundle of files with everything you need to actually use the code. So it's basically a distribution format and it's usually used with Python libraries, but you can also use it with applications if you want, especially common with dev tools. Maybe you've used some auto formatter like Yap for Black, or maybe you've used Pylint or some other tool like that, which is distributed as a package. And the most common way to distribute packages is through PyPI, which is what's the default when you do a pip install. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit about doing private repositories. We're not going to host any intricate version of that. We're just going to do a very simple version of it. But basically, I'm going to show you both how you can pip install directly from a wheel file, but also from your own web server, basically. So we have a couple of different packaging formats. The most relevant ones, or the ones we're going to discuss today, is source dist, which is a source distribution. It's usually packaged in a tar.gset file. We're going to talk a little bit about eggs in the .egg file. And then finally, we're going to talk about wheels, which I think is the most exciting format, or one of the really nice things. And the name wheel comes from cheese wheels, so that's why I have a wheel of brie here. And that's because the PyPI is called the cheese shop, which is an internal joke, because everything is Monty Python themed in Python. So let's talk a little bit about source dist then. So the sdist format is, as I said, source distributions. So it's basically just a package of all the source code. Usually it's a package.tar.gc, but it can also be a zip. It can be a tar.bc or exe. I added also big C set here in parentheses, but it's not really used anymore, and it's not encouraged to use. So I just kept it there to show that it can exist as well, especially in older packages. And since it's a source dist, it's just source code, so you need to compile it if there's compilation needed. And for all the dependencies, you actually have to resolve them. And if you have a setup.py, you actually need to execute that setup.py to understand what requirements exist for the package. And this is also why dependency resolution can sometimes be slow in Python, and something we want to avoid. And that's something that the wheel will help us with. It's usually distributed alongside another format. So earlier when we had eggs, you would have a source dist and an egg. And now with wheels, you have a wheel and a source dist. So with the source, you can always get the source code, but if you just want to get a like ready-to-use package, then the wheel is maybe more interesting. So eggs then. Eggs is an old de facto standard, so it's not Python standard, but it was used to distribute Python packages for a long time. I'm not going to go into them very deep because they are not really used anymore, and they are being replaced by wheels, and which is this new standard format. But I want to mention them for legacy reasons, so you understand that eggs had a big part before, and you will sometimes see them if you see older stuff. But going forward, I would recommend using wheels. So to the main guest of the day, wheels then. So this is the new standard format, or new. It was accepted in 2013, so not that new, but basically, yeah, that's the new format we use now, and it replaces eggs. You can convert eggs directly to wheels, so so that's good to know. And the entire format is versioned, so you can also improve upon the format without having some compatibility issues. So there's been some good thought put into the project from the start. And there's compatibility targets directly embedded in the file name, so it's very easy to see which wheel you should use for tooling. There's no need for a setup.py, which we will see later. You can statically resolve dependencies, which makes it much faster to use dependency resolvers and install stuff. There's a signed record that is checked on install that keeps a hash of every file. You can also sign this record with a crypto key. Default tooling does not provide a way to check that, but all the stuff that's needed to implement tooling on top of existing tooling is into the format. We will go a little bit further into that later, so you will see. And as I said, it's a version format. So this concludes the first part of the talk. So now we're gonna go ahead and go to the hands-on session. If anyone has any questions before we start that, please put them into the chat and I'll try to check them. From what I can see, there hasn't been any messages yet in the live chat. And I'm gonna share a link to the GitHub repository. So if you want to use the code directly and follow along, you can clone this repository. So github.com/Hultnér Technologies /unpack Python packages. I'll copy this link and put it into the chat as well, so you can hopefully see it there. I put it on the YouTube chat there. Did it?
It doesn't look like it's gone.
Let me.
Tell you what, do you want to send it to me and I can put it in the chat myself? Because it might be that you can't send links, but my channel, my account's got elevated access to the live streams, so I can paste links, I think.
Let me do that on Discord.
Yep.
I think you should have received the link now.
Yep, I've got it. I think if I then go ahead.
Actually, I can also put it in the
there you go
Discord session.
That might work as well. The link is in the chat for those who are interested. It's the GitHub link that I've just posted in there. If you click that, it'll take you directly to the repository. Enjoy.
So I'm gonna do this just. So let's get started then. Don't need this right now. So I'm just gonna start a little bit, but if you want me to slow down or if you need me to repeat anything, just write in the chat and I'll try to accommodate. I try to keep an eye on the chat during this session. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure I have the chat up. Yes. So here is the repository. I've just cloned it locally, and basically I have a couple of folders here. We have this clean folder, which there is just an empty virtual environment in, which I will actually remove because we don't actually need it yet. I have the sandbox. This is just where I play around with some stuff, and then I have the one named sandbox manual package, which is where we will build our package from scratch. So I'll start by going into sandbox, which is the first part where we deconstruct the wheel. So you can see I have a folder here named Flask. I think this is where I keep just the Flask distribution. So this is just the Flask package. So I'm gonna remove this folder and remake it just so that we can follow along from the start.
Alex, I'm just going to jump in for a second. Would you be okay to increase the font size on your terminal, just because it's not showing up well on streams that aren't 1080?
Yeah, thank you. Do you think this is better?
That should be okay. Yeah, I just didn't want the quality to drop because I've got a sort of secondary stream, so it wasn't coming up very well.
Yeah. So we're gonna make a new Flask directory again, and we're gonna go into that, and now we're gonna download the Flask wheel. So I'm just gonna Google Flask wheel PyPI, and here we have that, and I'm gonna go into download files. Here we have the wheel file. So I'm just gonna copy that link, and I'm gonna put it. No, I don't have that. Let's just do it like this. I already have. Yeah. So I'm gonna output it to the same file name. So now we have the wheel package here. So now we're gonna explore and see how this format is actually constructed. So I've cheated because I've read the specifications, so I actually know how it works. But I'm gonna do it in a way that's that can show how you can discover some of these things, and how I kind of like just play around with stuff sometimes to understand how they work. So here we can see while running the file command on the wheel file that it's a zip archive, which tells us that we can actually unzip it. In the repository, there's also like a file named notes. In this notes file, I've made some notes with some useful commands you can use as well. And if you don't see what I write, you can just look in this file as well. So we can start with using the unzip-l command. This will list just which files exist in our zip archive, which we now know that the wheel is. And we can see that there's some dist info folder with some different files, and we can see there's the actual Flask package. So let's just unzip it. So now we have the folder Flask here, and we have the folder dist info, and as you can see, there is the actual Flask code in that. So what's in the dist info then? The dist info folder is what would be created by your tooling if you use some automated tooling, and this is what we want to understand now, how it works. So let's go into that, and let's check out these files a little bit. So let's do this and see what we have here. So this top level .txt and file is actually not a part of the wheel format. This is more an old thing from eggs, probably still used by a lot of tooling for compatibility reasons. I've seen that quite a lot of more modern tooling is not including it anymore because it's not needed. We have a license file, which basically is the license of the code. We have entry points here, which isn't a part of the wheel format either, but it's a part about of the packaging standard to show where commands have their entry points. We can see that the Flask command should be flask.cli main. Then we have the wheel description file here. So this is telling us some stuff about the actual wheel, this particular instance of the wheel. So it's telling us that it's using wheel version 1.0, which is the version we have right now. But this is what I meant with version. So if there's a change to the wheel format in the future, they can write version 2.0 or 1.1, and tooling will then be able to understand how to handle it based on that and not have to guess. We can see it's generated with bdist wheel, and we can see which version as well. Root is purely true here. This means that it's a pure Python library, and today we're not gonna go into C extensions and stuff like that, but for information you can know that this is something that would change then. The tag here tells us what compatibility is needed. So we have the Python version, we have the platform, and we have the ABI, or the ABI and the platform. And basically this tag here tells us that this will run on any platform with Python 3 because it's a pure Python library, so it's not platform dependent. You can also see this in the actual file name. So as you can see, we have the same tag here, and this is what I was talking about before. So tooling can see from the file name directly that it's for Python 3, and that it's used. It's not for any particular ABI version, and that it's usable on any platform. So here could otherwise be like if it's Windows, or if it's Mac, or if it's Linux, if it was a C binary, and if it's x86, or if it's ARM or something else. So let's go back into the dist info now. Oh, I'm already there. Yeah, so we looked at the wheel file. Let's continue and look at the metadata file. So here's the metadata file, and here is some interesting stuff. We can see it's metadata version 2.1. So this is also versioned, and this tells us that it's using the latest iteration of the metadata standard. There is like 2.2 proposal that's being worked on, but I don't think there's like any fundamental changes from what I can remember. We can see the name of the package is Flask. We can see the version. So this is the version of Flask then, which is 2.0.2 for the one I downloaded. A summary. So this is, yes, from the Flask project. So these things aren't required, but you can see like the homepage, who created it, the offer, the maintainer email. You can see some license information, some project URLs. So you can have quite a lot of metadata in here. Not required to have it all, but you should at least have like which Python version is needed, if there's any dependencies, which those are. So this requires this done. This is the basically from the same as the requirements.txt, but this actually can tell the tooling that these versions are needed, and that way the dependency resolver can actually statically resolve all these things without having to execute the whole setup.py and all those things. So this makes everything much faster. Provides extra, it's just some extra dependencies. We can see the trove classifiers here. Those are not required, but used, especially if you use PyPI. If you have your own private packaging server, maybe you don't use all the trove classifiers as much. Yeah, so this is basically what the metadata looks like. And lastly, maybe a bit more interesting is the record file, because here we actually have some things which are not just easily read at once. So we see here we have like a record of all the files in this wheel, and we can see here is some SHA-256, and we can see some string, and we can see some number. We will go into how these are created, and we can see that the record file doesn't have this, which of course is because you wouldn't be able to include the hash of the file inside the file itself. So if you want that, you would have to have that outside. So I'm gonna split this terminal so we can start investigating. So let's pick a file here. So let's take the init.py, just to take the first one. So let's see if we can generate this hash here from the record. So we can see it's a SHA-256. We have the file. Let's do this. Have the file here. Let's just try to do a SHA-SUM 6 on the file and see how close we get. So we see that we get something here, but obviously this isn't the same as what we have up here, because what we have up here isn't a hex string, but this is. So let's see if we can figure out how this works. So it's not just string representation. But with the trained eye, you can see that this looks kind of like a base 64 encoded version. But first we want to run this hex in reverse. So let's try and plain text hex. So that's not the same, obviously, but let's try base 64 encode. Now we can see that it's actually the same. So basically, by converting the hex value to a string and base 64 encoding that, or to bytes, and then base 64 encoding those bytes, we get the same hash that's up here. And then we have the number here, which we can probably figure out as well. So let's do 3, and we do the size, and look at the init to pi, and we can see this is the same number. So now we're getting somewhere. We can see that we have something similar. So I've prepared a short command here, and get the, here we can see the shot sum for all the files. But let's try something a little bit more involved and see if we can. Oh, what did I do there? I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Let's see if we can generate this actual record file some way. Simple. So I've actually prepared here a short shell snippet. So let's see what we, let's first try it out, and we can see that it actually generates a lot of stuff here. And we can ignore the record for now because that's empty. But let's just like quickly look at these. So main, and we can see it looks the same. We have the app.py and it looks the same. Let's just take some one thing way down here, like wrappers. And yeah, we can see. So we can see we now generated this kind of record with a simple shell script. We can also take a look at some of the disinfo, like the metadata. And yeah, we can see that it's the same. So what did we do now? So basically, we just did what we did manually, but I created like a loop in a one-liner here, which does this for all the files. So first, I did what we saw before, calculated the shot sum for all the files, and then I do some stuff here where I just pick out the file name and print it, and then I print out this SHA-256 prefix, and then we can see here I print the hex, but I pipe it through awk to get just the shot sum, and then I run it in reverse plane in XXD to get the bytes, which we saw before, and then I base 64 encode it, which we also did before. And what more do I do? Well, I remove the trailing equal sign because that's not used. And I also remove the trailing new line because we don't want lots of new lines here. And then then I take the file name and I get the file I send the file contents to word count to count how big the file is, then print that out, which is the last part here, which we saw before when we ran tree and checked the file sizes. And then I'm done. And I do this for all the files. So that's basically everything that's needed to generate this kind of record. So some of these things maybe feel a bit magic when you just get a wheel file, install it, and use it. But we've now actually deconstructed all the things in the wheel. So based on this, we actually now know how the format works. So we can actually build our own wheel based on this, which is the next step. So if someone has any questions this far, send it in the chat, and I will refresh as well to make sure I don't miss anything on the YouTube. And there's probably a few seconds of delay, so I'm gonna wait a little bit. But basically, if you have any questions before we go ahead and try to build our own wheel from scratch, do write it in the live chat, and I will respond. While I'm waiting for that, I will just go out of this folder and go into our manual package folder, which we were talking about before. So, yeah, we don't need to. Okay, so I don't see any questions. I'm going to take a quick look on Discord as well. No questions there either. So then I'll go ahead. Yeah, so what have I done now? Well, basically I've just changed directory. So if you have my GitHub repository, you have this sandbox folder here, which we worked in before, and now we're going to go over to this sandbox manual package. And we can see that we have some different stuff in here. This folder isn't in the GitHub repository, but there's like a built wheel, which I've done before. And the VNV is just like a virtual environment. So for now, I'm actually gonna delete those as well. So you can follow along with all the steps. Now I actually have the exact same things you have if you've cloned my repository. So let's see then. Let's go into the sandbox manual package and see what we did here. This is a very, I can remove the PyCache as well. This is like a very simple application. So we have the hello file here, which is just a function that imports a variable from the module. And this just says PyCon SE 2021 because that's when I first had this talk. But basically it says hello name, welcome to, and where we are. So let's change this to Flask then. Since we're at Flask now. So now we have Flask on here, and let's look at the main file. The main file, which is executed when the package is executed, just imports the hello world function from the hello world module and prints hello world Alex. So if I would run this, actually I shouldn't do like this, I should do this python.m yeah. So now if I run this module, you can see it says, hello Alex, welcome to FlaskCon 2021. If I would import let's do this, import sandbox manual package and here on it. Let's see, we have some stuff here. Module var and the version. We can see it says FlaskCon 2021 there. So here we have our very, very simple package, which we want to create the wheel of. Let me remove the PyCache. Need that. So let's go into this dist info then. So normally your tooling would generate this dist info for you, but since we're going to do everything manually, we will actually do this ourselves. So we can see that we have metadata, record, and wheel. Let's start with removing the record. We can actually take a quick look at it, but obviously we don't want to write this by hand, so I've written a script to do this for us, which we will use. So I'm going to remove the record file. Let's actually add these things to Git. So we have it up to date for future reference. So we're gonna update package for FlaskCon. Reasonable. I'll push those. Okay. Changes from another computer. That's just to read me, I think. This was just added some notes about this conference. So now we have the metadata and the wheel file here. So let's see how those are created. So this looks almost exactly as our old metadata from the Flask package we checked before. Let's change the generator here to FlaskCon 2021. I mean, this is just having some fun. It doesn't really say anything because we create the file manually, and it's a pure lib, it's a pure Python library. We still use the wheel version 1, and we want full compatibility with Python 3. So let's finish that, and I will add that as well. Update wheel generator for FlaskCon. And let's then check the metadata file. And we can see it's also metadata 2.1. We can see this isn't at all as big as the Flask package because this is a very simple package. So this is kind of like the bare minimum we need. So we can see it's sandbox manual package. We can see that the version of our package is 0.1.0. And of course, like these things would be generated by the tooling. If you use like modern tooling, this is just so we should understand how we would do this ourselves. And here's the offer, which is me. We can see it requires Python version 3.10 or more. It doesn't really do that, but for fun, I added that. And we're gonna say that we need something less than Python 4 and add some trove classifiers telling us it's Python 3 and 3.10. So now we have everything we need actually to create a wheel from this. So we haven't created a wheel yet. It's just a couple of files here, but we want to create a wheel based on this. So what will we do then? Well, I created this script here, which you can see, build wheel.sh. And this script is based on the things we did when we deconstructed the package later. I just added it up to a little bit more pretty script. So, or pretty would be stretching it. But basically, this is our simple wheel build bundler. Yes, it's written in ZSH because I didn't have enough time to actually rewrite it in proper bash. And yeah, this was hacked together for PyCon SE 2021 originally, but we're going to use the same script today. So what does it do then? It needs to know which package dir we're going to use. So that's input variable. It's going to check the distribution, which will be the package dir. The version is just hard-coded for now. As I said, do not use this for production. This is just a naive implementation to showcase how a wheel packager could work and just create a very simple one. Here I also explain this format for the file, which we talked about before, the tag, where we have the Python tag, the py3, and we have the ABI tag, none here, and we have the platform tag telling us any platform. Since it's a pure Python library, this will work great. And wheel file, this will just tell us where we want to put our wheel file. We want to put it in dist, and we want to name it distribution, which as we see here is the same as the package dir. So this would be Flask for Flask, but in our case it will be sandbox manual package. Then dash the version to know which version it is, so 0.1.0, and then dash the tag telling us if this wheel is applicable for our current machine, so Python 3 none any, which will work for any machine running Python 3. So after that, I just add some debugging output telling us we want to create a wheel for this package, and we will put it in this file path. Then we create the distribution folder if it doesn't exist, and we also remove the wheel file if there already is an old one. So that's what I did at the start of the talk, where I deleted the old one I had generated since before. Then we go into the record of the info dir and delete that as well, which I also did before. So this won't do anything right now, but this is just to make sure that these are freshly generated when we run the script. And here I do basically the same loop we went through before. I just wrote it out with some comments. So, I mean, I would say that telling that these kind of bash loops are readable would be stretching it, but with the comments here, we can at least follow along with what happens. So we do the SHA-SUM. Now we actually specify which folders we should look in and not just do everything. And then we loop through the hex. We output the file name and the hashing algo. We output the hash in base64 encoded bytes by taking the hex, converting it to bytes, base64 encoding it, removing the trailing equal sign, removing the trailing new line. We add the file size, and we do this for all. And then we sponge it into the record, or sponge it and then into the record. Why do we do this? Well, because if I wouldn't do this, as some of you probably know, shell scripts are streaming. So then we would, after the first iteration, start streaming this into the file. First line would be added to the file, which would mean that the actual record would, in the loop, actually catch some intermediate version of the record and add that to the record, which, as we discussed before, won't work because it will actually contain a half-baked invalid hash because you can't self-reference like that. So instead, we sponge it and then write the record. And this is also explained here. And after that, we add the record to the record, which is empty. And after that, we actually create the wheel file. So what we do then is recursive zip, because as we saw before, the wheel file format is just a zip file. So we create a recursive zip. We name it after what we added up there before. And it should include the package directory and the info directory. I add them in this order because it's recommended to have the dist info at the end so that we can amend to the metadata without doing a full rewrite of the entire wheel file. This is a part of the wheel specification. It's a recommendation, so it's not like required. Wheel file will still be accepted or valid if you add it in any other order, but this is the recommended way to package up your wheel. After that, we just write that the wheel was built successfully. So based on that, we want to actually run this script. So we need to supply it with the package dir as an argument, as the first argument. So let's then do that. Build wheel and sandbox manual package. See here, creating wheel for sandbox manual package, target dist/sandbox manual package 0.1.0 by none any.wheel. Yep, it didn't find any files to delete, I think. Or wait, I have to check that this was made correctly here. Okay, so something here went wrong. I think it actually doesn't. I think this might be the problem, that the script actually requires me to be inside the directory where my package will live. I just remembered. So I think if I do this one inside here, it will work. Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. So you actually have to go into sandbox manual package and run the script from inside there. And what you should target is actually the actual file folder containing the package. Sorry about that again. So let's check the dist. Here we have the sandbox manual package.wheel. So now we want to test out the wheel, see that it works. So let's go into what I call clean here. This is where I just deleted an old Python virtual environment before. See which version we use, 3.10. That's correct. If you want to use an older version, you can just change it, but I'm doing this with 3.10. Let's create a Venv environment. And let's activate it. Now we have our Python virtual environment here, and make sure I haven't done anything cheating. Let's do this. Sandbox manual package and see what happens. No module named, sandbox manual package. So, or actually, let's do it like this instead. So now we want to pip install our wheel. So where did we put it? We have our sandbox. Pip install. Have our sandbox and manual package, distribution, and the wheel file. Install it. Looks like it installed. It says successfully installed. So now we've actually installed our own wheel, which we created from scratch using nothing but a text editor. And we've installed with pip install. So using no ready tooling, we actually created a package. And we can see it actually works because it says, "Hello Alex, welcome to FlaskCon 2021. So this shows you how easy it actually is to create a wheel with nothing more than a text editor. And the last step I wanted to do now was try to host this wheel package on my computer, spin up a Docker container, running Python 3.10, and see if we can install it in the Docker container over the network or over our local network, and use it in the Docker container, kind of emulating having it on like a server locally at your company or at home, and being able to install your own packages from there in the same manner of way which you would do from PyPI. So let's remove the old here. Yeah. So I have this directory server here where I have this sandbox manual package. So I'll go into that. Now, of course, we want to use our new package. So actually, let's do this from scratch because the server folder isn't checked into Git because we want to create this ourselves. So I'm going to remove the server directory and recreate it. So you can follow along. Server, go into it. Now we want to create a folder for sandbox manual package. Here's an important convention, which you should know, is that the URLs should be normalized. So underscores actually translates to dashes. So we have to do sandbox manual package. And go into that. And here we want to put our wheel file. So let's go up to sandbox manual package and into the dist and the wheel file and copy it here. Have our wheel package. So now you might wonder what we've done here. Well, the thing is that the PyPI specification for hosting a packaging server is very simple. So if you have something like this folder structure we have here in server, where we have the normalized name of the package and in a directory, and in that directory we have all the versions, which is just one right now, for the wheel of this package. Then we can actually use this as a registry. And actually, it's as simple as just, let's do it over here instead, so we don't take up valuable real estate. So go into server and just do python.m http.server. So now we're hosting it at port 8000. Let's check my IP. This is actually not okay. I have something else here running, so let's just run it on another port. See what else there. I don't want unnecessary requests. So this is actually running on my laptop because I prefer to run the code on another computer, which is separated from the one I present from, to just isolate any hiccups. So so we can see here that the IP address for my laptop is 192.168.2.13. So let's do actually, let's do this with so that you can follow along as well in case you don't have HTTP Py installed. So this is just a directory listing, and we can see that we have the sandbox manual package here. And if we fetch that, we can see we have another directory listing and then a link to the actual file. This is actually everything that's required to have a very simple PyPI repository. So you don't need any fancy stuff. You just need a web server with the correct directory structure. Of course, maybe you want to have some more advanced stuff. Do I actually have another server there as well? Oh, of course I need to go to my laptop's IP because it's not running on localhost. This is my iMac. So here we have sandbox manual package. Here we have the wheel. So what were we going to do? Well, we wanted to, I just close that there. Why did I do that? Let's do this. So we have the web server here. Let's just add some new lines so we can see, and let's run Python 3.10 and open up a terminal. So if you want to follow along, I want to run Docker, a Docker container. I want to delete it once I close it because it's not something I need to keep. I want to attach it and have an interactive prompt. I want to run Python 3.10 I want to open a bash prompt. So here I get a terminal inside of the Docker container. If anyone now has any questions, or if they have trouble keeping up, tell me and I'll wait a little bit, or I'll answer any questions, because maybe you haven't gotten up your web server, or maybe you want some more guidance with any part, or want me to repeat any of the steps. If so, just tell me, otherwise I'll go ahead here. So we have pip, and now we want to pip install the file from this new repository. So based on that, we want to use the index URL, which is 192.168.2.13, because that's where we host the server. So let's do this. Pip install, and actually let's find it via the documentation. So that you actually can see how you would discover this yourself. I don't want to just give the answer. So it should, actually pip install. It should give you some options here, and one of those should be the index. Here, package index options. So here you can actually specify the index URL, or you can have an extra index URL using additional or no index using find links. We're going to use index URL. This way we will know that we use our repository. So pip install index URL 192.168. Actually, I think I should actually add HTTP as well. If you would host this on a network, you would probably use HTTPS. But for now, this is just a demo. So what did we want to install? Well, we wanted to install sandbox manual package. Actually, yeah, let's do this. Could not service. Let's see. Let's just first ensure that it's not already installed. The module found. Let's try with the trusted host here. Actually, I see what I've done wrong. Oh. Actually, I saw something here. This should be sandbox, no module. Okay, let's try the trusted host here. Always something that goes wrong during a demo, right? I did this like the other day. So, yeah. So you need to add trusted host with the IP address, or with the address if you don't use HTTPS. So now we can actually try to execute our package again. And here we see it. Hello, Alex. Welcome to FlaskCon 2021. So what have we done now? We've created our own wheel from scratch after trying to figure out how wheels work. Added all the metadata ourselves. We generated a record based on the script, which we built based on what we used when we discovered how the wheels worked. We archived that up into a wheel file. We added that wheel file to a new server folder where we had a normalized URL for the sandbox package. We hosted a simple HTTP server on port 80. We opened a Docker container, which essentially is another computer for intents of the talk. We ensured that the package wasn't already installed there by trying to execute it and saw that it didn't exist because it said no module named sandbox manual package. Then we pip installed it from our package repository via the URL. We executed the package again and actually got the output. So we installed it from a server, in this case, the computer we wrote the code on, to another computer, the Docker container, executed it, and got some output. So we built a wheel, we distributed it via a pip compatible PyPI compatible API, and we installed it and used it. So now you actually know the essentials of the Python packaging ecosystem, and this is like the fundamental core part of the talk, and what I wanted to teach you today. And with that said, of course, this is not how you would normally create a package every day. There is different tools, but there's a lot of great tooling. I usually use Poetry these days, and to show you what it can look like today, I've actually have a Poetry project in here. Where we have very similar hello world type of application, but we don't manually have we don't manually add the dist info stuff. So let's remove the dist here. I have the PyProject.toml here, which is the Poetry project file. So this is created for you when you create a Poetry environment. I added some dev tools, but these aren't used when you distribute it. We can see that we should include a sandbox package. Yeah, basically this is the Poetry file. If you've used Poetry, you can see it's generated for you, and you can add your own stuff to it if you want. And we have the log file. We have the readme.rst, which is empty. So let's, Poetry shell opens up a shell with the Poetry environment. Here we can see we have a very similar thing to what we created before. And with Poetry, we have all these nice things built in. So you can do Poetry build, and it will build a tarball and a wheel for you, creating all the metadata, creating the record, doing all the stuff we did now. It also got support to publish it to a remote repository if you want to do that. So if you want to publish it to PyPI, you would just do the Poetry publish. If you want to do like we did now, host it on a server like this, then we would do Poetry build. And we can see that we have the dist folder here, and we have the wheels in there. So let's go into the dist here, and let's list the files in the wheel here to show you that it's almost the same, which we created manually. And let's also unzip it fully. Let's go into Record looks almost identical to what we had before. Wheel looks the same, just that it generates poetry instead. Metadata is actually identical to the version of our own package. So just doing poetry build, if you use poetry, is enough to get everything for you served up. So there's no need to do all this manually. This is just purely to understand how everything works. And there are different tools as well. There's like Flit, there's of course Bidist wheel, and there is there's a bunch of tools, and you can use whichever you want. Poetry is just the one I use, but actually we want to also try out what we did before with the own packaging server, which we host here, but do it with the poetry built wheel. So let's go into server and create Sandbox, which is our new package built by Poetry. And let's copy the Sandbox package into our server. And let's deactivate our poetry shell. Let's run our Docker container again, a new Docker container. Sandbox does not exist. And to just show you that this is a completely new one, let's try our old one as well. Does not exist either. And as we did before, git install index URL http://192.168.2.13. Here you would use your own IP, of course. And we needed to do trusted host as well. And install Sandbox instead of the package. And python.m sandbox. Hello. So a little bit simpler, a little bit faster, but essentially achieving the same thing. And of course, we can install Sandbox manual package as well. Run that. And we can see that works as well. So now we have a package built with Poetry as well. Much faster, much easier. Distributed, installed it, used by the same client which we used our first package, and it works. So if you have any questions, write them in the chat now. If you want me to repeat any of these steps, if you want me to show anything again, or want me to go further into something, you can tell me that now. Otherwise, we will go ahead with the conclusion and end the interactive part of the talk. I'm actually watching the stream muted here on the side, so I'm giving you some time to catch up because I think there's a little bit of delay. And of course, some time to write questions if you have some question.
While we wait for people to write some questions, just wanted to say thank you for that. That was actually really informative. I use Poetry for virtual environments. I didn't realize it could distribute and build at the same time.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's like one of the really nice things about Poetry. I've used like pipenv before as well, and like one of the killer features of Poetry is that it actually got all the publishing and build tools built into the same tool, so you have like one fits all solution, which is really nice.
until that solution breaks.
Yeah, and once it breaks, it's very nice to know how things works under the hood, because then you can investigate.
Yes, I think I'm running the preview on my, I think it's 1.2.0 Alpha 2 on my machines at the moment, and you've got a lot of things. And we've got a question which I'm just going to pop up for us now. What's the use or possibilities for someone having the ability to craft wheels from scratch?
So I would say, like, as an engineer, I always have like an interest, or I'm always eager to understand how things works under the hood. And I think a lot of other engineers probably do the same. Maybe that's what's pushing us towards engineering. And understanding how things works, of course, is useful more than as a pure recreation thing. Because, yeah, as I told you just now, that when something breaks apart, or when the tooling doesn't do what you want to do, or something goes wrong, if you actually understand how things work, it's much easier to investigate. It's much easier to see what's wrong, try to fix it, or maybe you want to build your own tooling, or contribute to some tooling. Then it's also useful to understand how it works, or just like keep up with the packaging ecosystem, what happens. I mean, of course, it's not essential to know this for anyone. I say that this is more, if you want to, this is how it works, and it's quite fun to understand. But that's also why I showed the poetry parts at the end, because this is not something you need to do every time, and this is not something you usually need to care about. It's just something that's nice to know, and it's nice to understand that the format isn't actually that complex. It's quite simple when you get to it. It's just that it can feel a bit sometimes, I mean, from my part at least, when you just see a file with some extension and you have no idea how it works, it can feel a bit like daunting, like, what is this file? But there's something fun with trying to figure it out. I hope that answers the question. Maybe I went a bit sideline here.
It was definitely provided some depth to the answer, which is quite nice, because sometimes you don't get depth with the answers for questions. So thank you very much for that.
I'm just gonna also show like some slides here. So this is just the conclusion, which I talked about. So wheels are just simple zip files, which is like the main gist of the talk, and it's a static metadata format, which enables faster and better tooling, but you don't need to do everything we did now, and packaging it's much more easy with modern tools. And I just wanted to put up this slide as well with all the links from the talk, and like how to contact me, the GitHub repository again, slides. Yeah. If you want to see more or so, just tell me. Or if you have any questions and you don't want to bring them up now, or if you watch the talk recorded and want to know more about something, you can hit me up via email or via Twitter. Yeah, just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you very much for joining us. It was great to have you with us today, and thank you very much for the talk. It was an excellent talk, and I hadn't actually explored the depth of how this worked before. I just took it as a rote that it worked, and I didn't need to worry about it.
Yeah, that's usually. That's usually how you start, and at some point, it's always fun to understand how things actually work.
Indeed. It's always nice when you start working out how things work to get an understanding of how it does what it does. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay.